Hello, and welcome to the second video in my Age of Reflection series. As I've said several times in my last couple of videos, the Age of Reflection is an effort on my part to analyze my current builds, but also kind of adapt them to what this game does particularly well these days. The previous version of this build was known as the Astral Collector, and used a combination of the Wing of Estelle and Rogier's Rapier, which honestly should have been the Anspur Rapier to go along with the general pieces of various space bugs vibe that the Astral Collector had going for him. But at a certain point I just found that I spent every invasion backpedaling. Backpedaling to cast more spells, backpedaling to set up the Wing of Estelle's R2 attack, and just in general trying to get away from the party. And I was able to do it way too well due to the light roll tier in my physic. Embarrassingly, this led me to back up off quite a few cliffs, which is really up there in terms of embarrassing ways to lose invasions. But also, backpedaling just isn't a fun way to play this game, and I don't think it's a fun way for other people to fight me either. And worst of all, during the Age of Mage, I started to notice that a lot of my melee combat fundamentals were really falling off. Spacing already is less important in this game compared to previous games, but it had completely gone out the window. My heal discipline was getting sloppy, my tunnel vision was getting worse, and I was becoming far too reliant on gimmicks and magic spam to win all of my invasions. So I wanted to change things up. I wanted to restore my melee combat fundamentals. I wanted to have a setup that can be a lot more aggressive that isn't just Carian Slicer in your face. And thus, I embarked upon a journey across the lands between, to observe and draw conclusions. And I would let the game tell me what direction I needed to take this build in. I would observe what makes certain enemies quite powerful and dangerous to approach. I would observe how certain enemies have a built-in strategy that makes their attacks and invasions incredibly vexing to their opponents. And in some cases, I would observe how stealth was finally fully utilized as a core mechanic in a Souls-like game. But most important of all, I would observe what the developers truly wanted the player to choose as their weapon. This character kind of needed a different attitude with its new approach. It needed a name change and a new set of armor to reflect its new outlook on invasions. So, who was once the Astral Collector, wielder of space bug limbs and appendages, is now the Glintstone Gunslingers, the cold-blooded killer of Night's sacred ground. With his paired sabers of Moonlight and Glintstone, he walks the lands between in an unseen form, vanquishing the targets of any order that is willing to pay his bounty. He is the Astral Rogue. So I thought I'd show the stats and weapons like I usually do for these build videos, but this time mostly to highlight the fact that I actually put a few points into endurance. A truly mind-blowing concept, right? For the longest time during the Age of Mage, I was operating with a Bloodborne build-making mentality. Invest nothing into endurance because stamina regens so quickly in this game. But upon reflecting on the previous iteration of this build, I found myself constantly feeling like my inputs were being dropped. And when I actually went back and looked at the footage of these instances, about 75% of the time, it wasn't my inputs being dropped, it was that I was running out of stamina. So I've resolved to return to my DS3 method of build making, which is to always save a few points at the end of my build for vitality and endurance to make things feel a bit comfier so that I'm not running out of stamina with any sort of frequency. Otherwise, I feel like I'm constantly overextending myself, always on the edge of not being able to roll away from a classic Elden Ring co-opper projectile of half your health. And since vitality and endurance are now the same stat, I only need to leave a few points at the end of build making rather than the 6 to 7 like I would in DS3. Now, those extra points allow me to use 2 katanas as my weapons of choice. You might ask, Rofo, what are you, some sort of weeb? And the answer is yes. Yes I am. Yes I have always been. You finally found me out. Anyone who has ever played a Japanese video game is hereby a weeb. Sucks to be you, Mario and Sonic fans. But the real reason is that katanas fit right into the niche of what I want this build to do. In fact, what I want all of my builds to do going forward. You see, during the return to Lordran, I kept thinking about making a build that does what that game did really well. And what's really good in this game is, well, katanas for one. But what I'm getting at is also power stance weapons. I am sick and goddamn tired of you bozos jumping on my head with power stance weapons. So now it is my turn to return the favor. And now I finally have the endurance to properly do so. So power stance katanas, or as I like to refer to them a lot, dual cats, they really solve the problem for the backpedaling issue I was talking about earlier. The power stance rolling attack is fantastic for rolling away counterattacks, and even aggressive roll-in attacks. Plus, since I'm still light rolling, my rolling attacks come out like a few frames faster than if I was rolling just normally. But by far the best part is the power stance jumping attacks for heal punishes. The ability to properly heal punish on this build is something I've been severely lacking, and now because I have to engage in melee combat a lot more often, I feel like I'm starting to really regain a lot of my melee combat fundamentals. Now, I'm sure some of you have already seen the weapon in my offhand and are angrily typing in the comments as we speak, so let me just get this out of the way. This is a Dex and Intelligence build, and one of the best weapons in the entire game is a Dex and Intelligence weapon, and I'm using that in the offhand. It's a purely honest Moonveil. I'm not maining it, I swear. It is not something that gets pulled out in every invasion, or even frequently. It is something that I just keep around as that find out weapon. I've explained to you what a find out weapon is before. I'm not going to do it again. Let's move past it. I am going to talk about the Moonveil again, so just prepare yourself. In the main hand, I'm using a cold Uchi Katana. It might be marginally more efficient to have a magic infused one, but I like the ability to proc Frost with a bit of R1 spam. And since that third Katana R1 is a pretty consistent roll catch, the Frostbite procs with some frequency thanks to ghost hits. Now, said Frosty Katana has an Ash of War that was nerfed quite a while ago, Glintstone Pebble. If you don't remember, Glintstone Pebble was once considered incredibly meta, since the L2-R2 of the Ash of War true comboed for approximately 1 billion damage. After a period of time that was definitely too long, FromSoft wisely nerfed Glintstone Pebble so that it was no longer a true combo, but both parts of the Ash of War still do very decent damage. Glintstone Pebble is basically my hand cannon. It's always on my hip, just an L2 away, and that makes me incredibly quick on the draw. Having the Quickdraw Pebble on hand at all times makes for the most satisfying snipes in the world. It doesn't quite have the tracking or sheer speed of Swift Glintstone Shard, but the damage is better and the follow-up R2 is the real kicker. Something I like to do a lot with Pebble is just to throw out that first L2 like several times. Not spamming it necessarily, but just kind of pinging your opponents with it, because it will still do good damage. Then once they get a little bit closer to stop being pinged, you follow up the R2, and that really hurts. And something that's rather clunky with spellcasting in really any FromSoft game is that you have to tab to the right spell that you want. And sometimes you need to get someone really quick from a distance, but you don't always have time to switch back over to Swift Glintstone Shard before your opponents can reach their flask. And that's exactly the kind of situation that you need Glintstone Pebble in. So back to the evil weapon real quick. Now, I've been a good Rofa. I've been using it sparingly, solely for stylish finishers and the occasional specific use case. First and foremost, let's talk about my revelation, that everyone is using the Moonveil incorrectly. Well, incorrectly isn't quite the right word, because the way people use Moonveil is just to spam Transient Moonlight, and that works pretty effectively when there are 2 to 3 of them and one opponent. Occasionally I throw on the Taunter's Tongue and get invaders who only use Transient Moonlight as their primary attack. This is what I mean by incorrectly using the weapon. And I'm sure those invaders have learned this behavior by invading those aforementioned parties of 2 or 3, who, I would have to guess, obliterated that invader in turn with their own cavalcade of Transient Moonlight. But these are not the lessons invaders should be learning, or at least not the lessons they should be applying to how they use the weapon. The second part of this is that the weapon is a katana, so use it like one. Spam those good running R1s, running R2s, and standing R1s. And then when you've bullied your opponent into panic rolling away from your manic slashing, that is the time to use Transient Moonlight. And the third part is that the best attack this weapon performs as an invader is actually the L2R1, not the L2R2, or the horizontal slash rather than the vertical slash. The L2R1 doesn't do quite as much damage, but it still does like a lot of damage. It's the Moonveil. More importantly, it can trap multiple opponents in one slash for crowd control, and it's wide enough that it catches poor rolls that you forced from, some actually skillful katana play. Now, that's not all to say that you should never use the L2R2, because it truly does have its excellent uses. It is one of the few excellent turn and burns in the game, and I think I'm going to use it right here to turn and burn this host, break their guard, and end the invasion with one riposte. Something else I wanted to address was intelligence builds versus faith builds. If you've been watching my videos for a little while, you'll probably have noticed as of late that pretty much all of my builds during the Age of Mage have been intelligence builds, but I will say that's definitely not intentional. I've actually been trying to make lots of other types of builds, trying to revamp my arcane build to something interesting yet effective that isn't just your run-of-the-mill bleed build with double curved swords and stacking the winged talisman buffs. I've been trying to retool a couple of my own faith builds to play in a unique and different way that isn't just catch flame and the occasional free-aimed Giant's Flame take thee. This long string of excuses is a weird way for me to say that as of right now, intelligence builds have all of the super fun and interesting stuff to use as a mage invader. Seriously, intelligence builds have all the good throwables in the game. Every interesting consumable seems to scale with intelligence. You got small and large glintstone scraps, gravity fans and chunks, cuckoo glintstone, and even just regular old magic pots that hit like a truck. And on top of that, intelligence builds have all of the good mists, as well as all the best fast projectiles, and not just like a couple fast projectiles, they have so many different choices and flavors of fast projectile, also known as the pew pew. So in a game where invaders need to be agile in order to avoid giant projectiles of doom, fast projectiles with quick casting speeds seem far superior to me at least. That's not to shit all over faith builds, but man, I'm just really struggling to find one that plays a little differently than how everyone is already playing it. I have a couple of ideas in the works that might be interesting, but we'll see if they pan out. So far, they have not. Anywho, because of all of these fantastic consumables I mentioned earlier, I thought it'd be best to make the character who can take advantage of them the most this mischievous rogue with a bag full of tricks to eat at people. If you've seen the latest Puss in Boots movie, which, by the way, you should, it was quite entertaining and fun, one of the characters has this bottomless bag of magical items that he uses to throw at the main characters, and that's pretty much exactly what I have. Actually, if I give it a little bit more thought, it's really just a bag full of magical rocks that I throw, but the magical rocks do different things when they hit the ground, and that's pretty fun. Oh, and to add just one more layer into this arsenal of gimmickry, I have also been using Hidden Body, or I guess it's called Unseen Form in this game, with the host's Trick Mirror, rendering me invisible to the eye of co-opers who are generally unaware of their surroundings. People who are looking for me will actually see me coming, but if someone is distracted with some PvE, or hey, if it's even dark, they are going to get a dual cat jumping attack on their heads. At the end of the day, the Astral Rogue vaguely reminds me of some of the gameplay from Dishonored, which features highly agile combat with sabers as the main melee weapon of choice, and a whole arsenal of magical powers and gadgets at their disposal. So yeah, I'm combining the general vibes of a magic cowboy with gameplay elements of the Dishonored steampunk assassins. Seems like a very strange combination, but I don't know, I kind of feel like it all works somehow. And when I'm fighting people who might not get maybe both vibes, maybe they get one or the other, and I'd be pretty happy with that. Yes, I make these builds for YouTube, but mostly I make them for the people that I'm invading, who I'm not sure appreciate my presence in their world, but nonetheless, I'm trying to create these cool interactions between myself and other people and myself. It's a two-way street, and sometimes I think you have to remember that invasions are an ecosystem. And if you just always invade people with like the sole intent that I'm just gonna fuck them up and win, I think they're gonna treat you the same way. And I don't think people like being treated that same way back. So I kind of approach these things with like, here's my character, here's how I'm gonna try to win. Is it effective? Because I do want to win. But at the same time, acknowledging that like, if every single invader just wants to be as optimized as humanly possible, people are gonna optimize back at you. And you kind of have to be okay with them optimizing right back at you. Anyways, this is a long and rambling way to say, maybe invade with some style, and think about your interactions with other players in this game. It might be hard to believe, but there are indeed other people behind those silly little avatars that you're fighting. This next section you're welcome to skip if this is not the sort of thing that you care about, but I did want to spend some time talking about build making workflow, and then also some feedback for me in particular. So I'm always operating like 2 builds ahead of what I'm making a video on, meaning I recorded all of this footage like, it says 2 to 3 weeks ago in the script, it's really at this point like a month ago, but I came up with these ideas like a month before that, and I'm just now getting it down into video form. Right now I'm working on making several other builds that are all in various stages of completion. I also want to show more invasions in their entirety. I've noticed that my process makes it so that I'm constantly chopping invasions up for their key moments and showing those, usually in some way with how they relate to my narration. At the moment, my process goes like this. I do a bunch of invasions and save the ones I find noteworthy via a replay buffer. I then review and edit down some of these invasions to get rid of a lot of the loading screens and searching for invasions moments. In doing so, I basically form some ideas and draw some conclusions about the invasions I just did, and jot down some ideas for a script. I then write the script, usually making exactly 1 draft, and then recording that draft shortly after I'm done writing it. Then it's basically all editing, but I'm picking and choosing invasions that will be the most relevant to what I'm talking about in the recorded script. So that whole workflow used to take me about a week to 2 weeks. Now it takes me about a month just because I have less time to play the game, but also just because I'm trying to put a little bit more effort into like these bigger videos that are part of like the Age of Reflection. So that means I revise the script here and there, maybe I do a couple of takes of the narration, and I'm spending a lot more time collecting a lot more clips before I sit down and start writing a script. This workflow has worked pretty well for me for a while, but I've been wanting to change things just a little bit. Now, I don't know if this is entirely feasible or coherent, but what I was thinking about doing going forward was to chop up the recordings of my script into smaller chunks and fit those over the full invasions that I recorded, but then fill in those parts of the script with other comments about the flow of the invasion or what I'm doing in a particular instance. I don't know. I'll play around with this more going forward. Maybe I'll even make a few videos where I just live commentate the invasions, or do a mix of script and live commentary going forward. I would really love to hear your guys' feedback on it actually, if you have a preference for what you'd like to see in these videos. I will warn you, if you want me to do more live commentary, I am not Saint Riot, I am not Peeve Peeverson. I do not have funny off-the-cuff commentary to provide. If you've ever laughed during one of my videos, ever, at any point, it's entirely because I wrote that joke in the script and edited it or delivered it in a way that you found slightly humorous, in a halfway decent manner. In the past, I've actually found myself really disliking my live commentary on invasions, so I don't know, we'll see how far I get with this idea. Maybe my impressions of it have changed. It's just something to consider. Well, I hope you enjoyed this rather deep dive into a build that I really didn't do a whole lot for. It was really just a vibe adjustments and refocus. But that's one of the things I really enjoy about Elden Ring in particular, is that we have the flexibility to adjust our characters with slight but meaningful nudges, like a name change, something we were never able to do in the past. Elden Ring has a lot of problems in general, but as a lot of you know, I'm prone to celebrating the things it does that are new and different, more than complaining about the way things used to be in past games. But looking forward to the future, there's a couple of things. We got a DLC announcement. Well, more of a confirmation that they're working on it, and that's awesome. I can't wait for more of this game. I will say, I really don't expect to see this anytime soon. This is a "it's in development" tweet, which we got like 3 of over 3 years waiting for Elden Ring. My best guess is that we'll get a release date sometime in the next 2 to 3 months, and then a launch date for sometime this summer. I have no sources on this. This is just a guess and a wild prediction that I'm making. People might point to other trends of what FromSoft likes to do when releasing their DLC, but honestly at this point I'm ready to throw all previous trends out the window. This game has sold way too many copies, defied so many expectations, and gotten such an insane amount of good press that any precedents set by previous games should just be ignored. FromSoft is going to do whatever the hell FromSoft wants to do in the next 2 to 3 years based on all the goodwill they've built up as a titan in this industry, and I think at this point I'm not sure their own publisher Bandai Namco can really tell them what to do. They're kind of Bandai's golden goose right now. However, I still think this current game needs a new patch. There are still several balance issues that could use some help, but man, it seems like connections have gotten dramatically worse in the last month or so. Like, just watch some of the clips I've put up here on the video. This doesn't seem like the usual phone hotspot bootlegged Wi-Fi that people are often playing on. These connections are some next level stuff. Maybe that's a server problem, or maybe I'm just running into some especially egregious Wi-Fi enjoyers, who is to say. But apparently there's a patch that's almost ready to be deployed, and has been in QA for quite some time, so I wonder when that is coming out. Regardless, I guess we will just have to wait and see for what the future holds, but I think it's best not to fret about it. This patch could drop and radically alter all of my builds, rendering most of my videos that aren't already really out of date even more useless than before. The DLC could drop out of nowhere and add a bunch of ridiculously overpowered weapons that don't get nerfed until you develop a seething hatred at just the sight of said weapons. The point here is that we don't know, and we should embrace our lack of knowledge with blissful acceptance instead of just staying up into the wee hours of the night, pondering the unknowable. And now I leave you with one final message, totally unrelated to anything I talked about in this video. Around the Oscar Awards every year, I find myself saying, hey, I never saw any of these movies, so I've been making an effort to change that. If you are looking to watch any movies this year, please go either see Tar or Everything Everywhere All at Once. They are both incredible movies, and Tar even has an incredible reference to Monster Hunter World of all games in it. I just ask that you watch the movies in their entirety, undistracted, because while they both might be insanely different movies, there was much to pick apart from both that I found really worthwhile. And if you like picking apart Souls and Elden Ring lore so much, you might actually like doing the same in a different medium as well. You might come back and say, Rofa, I hated both these movies, why did you tell me to do that? And I will say, oh no, you experienced some art. How tragic for you. Anyways, that's all from me, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.